So our next presentators and speakers are Ülle Soosaar and Allik from Estonia Open Air Museum. Welcome.
So, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you. I know this is the third morning. It's not so easy, and the coffee break is coming closer and closer. So I try to speak as shortly as it's possible. My work, completed two years ago, is based on practical conservation work. The purpose, which was to extend the life of two posters depicting Georg LURICH, the world-famous wrestler from Estonia, and to prepare the posters for digitation. The practical works I did at the Conservation and Digitation Center Kanut in Tallinn, of course in cooperation with my supervisor, Mrs. Allik, and the material studies at the Tallinn University of Technology. The first one, the full-length portrait, and the second one, sorry, they both are here. Both of those portraits were brought to Kanut for conservation in February 2020 and returned to museum to the Viljandi Museum a year later. Those posters are large objects compared to the normal parameters of work on paper. Posters arrived at Kanut in really very poor condition. They were rolled up and sometimes very dirty. Numerous paper damages, tears, vertical fault lines, and so on were found, which badly distorted the image, especially in the area of this. Both posters were glued on cardboard for reinforcements, which was unsuitable for the preservation. The condition of the posters, which are no more than the century old, has been affected by both by the time, it's natural aging, and the humor factor. Obviously, the posters have been in heavy use. And it was not possible to digitize them in this form. So this is the right one. Shortly about the persons on and behind the posters. Georg LURICH, this nobleman here, was one of the three most famous professional wrestlers in Estonia at the end of the 19th century. At the time, he was also considered to be the most handsome built man in the world, so-called Kalevipoeg, like in Latvia, last places. In addition to his physical fitness, he was well educated and broad-minded. However, an interesting nuance to the history of the LURICH posters is added by another much less known man, this one. Estonian publisher and bookseller Heino Leoke, whose library stamps is on the full-length portrait. Georg LURICH's business partner, wrestling partner, and later friends has a definitely place in Estonian culture history, especially as a promoter and promoter of theater and children's literature. The posters were printed by using the lithographic technique. In very short and simple terms, it means that an image is drawn on stone slab with a grease pencil, which transferred to the paper using a press. The LURICH posters were printed in Adolf Friedlander's lithography printing house in Hamburg, and both posters bear the printer's mark. One mark and the other. Since all the works from the printing house have been numbered, information about each posters could be found in catalog reflecting the history of the printing house by this kind of ID code. This catalog has information about posters found in several museums in Germany, and thus is all the more surprising to see how many full-length posters have been preserved in those collections, whereas there is no information at all about the pressed portrait. Material studies were also carried out, which included the examination of the condition and origin of the paper fiber. The results confirmed once again that the paper has been severely degraded over the time by various factors: intensive use, low quality raw material, unsuitable assembly method. And even in some places, the paper was held to cover only by printing ink. The posters were printed on low quality paper, which may have been produced using recycled rag paper. This is indicated by the fibers of plants in the preparation, as well as wood pulp, softwood and hardwood fibers. Unfortunately, it was practically impossible to identify specific types of food, as the food fibers were extremely decomposed and lost their original shape during a repeated process. This is one of my favorite photos taken during the studies. Jan told us about corona slaves. So we told that this it looked like coronavirus. But in reality, after a few weeks, those seemingly innocent cuties became growing mold in the humid environment in methyl cellulose. So it looks like so. Ensure the preservation of the paper, the most important work steps were removal of the strongly acidic cardboard and the removal of decay products from the paper during wet processing on a vacuum table. Removing the cardboard was time-consuming, considering the fragility of the paper. Sometimes it was like a surgery. Vacuum washing was one of the most difficult steps in conservation process for me, because I was afraid of further damaging of already fragile paper when wet. And there are several stages of wet processing, and the time is so limited. In the case of large and severely damaged posters, the best solution for conservation was to support them for the reverse. The background that the posters was attached to the stretching board for stretching. For this purpose, we used a suitable size of plywood panel. The advantage of using a stretching board over a press was that correction and toning will be started practically immediately. During the work, the order of conservation phases changed. While it was originally planned to take the posters off the base, finish, and finally digitize, in reality, it was more reasonable to photograph the posters on the stretching board to achieve a high quality digital copy. And not surprisingly, the dimensions, the posters were the biggest challenge for this conservation work. Compared to the original parameters of objects on paper base, the posters were large. A press portrait with dimension 71 by 95 centimeters and a full-length portrait with dimensions of 65 by 178 centimeters. The preparation work, table, vacuum table, as well as the detailed planning of the work processing, washing, packing, digitizing, required non-traditional, even out-of-the-box solution. And at least 2 persons had to work together in order to perform some steps. The larger poster was conserved in separate shades. Yeah. The posters were stretched on the stretching board because there was no suitable paper suitable size press. To the format of the posters, making a suitable preservation box was also quite a challenge. It required combining and manual work. Also, placing the large preservation box in the museum storage was also not an easy task. So, and finally, after the restoration, the press portrait looks like so, and the full-length portrait. You will see the difference, this face and this face. And finally, here is another picture to illustrate the format of posters. For comparison, my height is 1 by 60 meters. In conclusion, I can say that the conservation work was due with the respect for both historical objects and their documentary value. A piece of history was given a future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ülle. Is there some quick question from the audience? So thank you so much for the impressive body images on the screens.